Alex Nichiporchik here from tinyBuild, and I just had the most amazing fireside chat with Randy Pitchford and Steve Gibson from Gearbox. We talked about all kinds of things. We talked about publishing, we talked about next-gen consoles, we talked about Borderlands, development, where the industry is heading, entertainment in general. It was really insightful, and when I ended the Zoom call and pressed render video, it kind of got fully corrupted. Now, fortunately, I actually ticked the little box that says give me temporary source files, and we were able to recover temporary source files with audio tracks. So we were able to get all of the audio from the fireside chat. The video, though, it got lost in translation. Now, lesson learned, and while we would love to have video, the conversation was so organic and so energetic that we would not be able to recreate it if we had re-recorded it. So please enjoy the fireside chat with Randy Pitchford and Steve Gibson, where we did little animations to show you who's talking to make it a little bit easier, and grab yourself some tea and enjoy. I hope you like it. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, I have a really exciting fireside chat here today with Gearbox, with Randy Pitchford and Steve Gibson. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about yourself, what you do at Gearbox?
Sure. I'm Randy Pitchford. I founded the Gearbox Entertainment Company, which includes Gearbox Software, which I run, and we make video games. We're developers, and also includes Gearbox Publishing, which is run by Steve Gibson, who's the president of Gearbox Publishing. Steve?
Gentlemen, yep, I do that.
You do that?
Yes.
Hey Steve, how's it going?
Peachy, man. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good.
This is my first virtual conference.
Yeah.
Really? Well, you're really prepared with the fade-ins and fade-outs there. I'm not sure how that's gonna look on video, but guys, we're gathered here to talk a little bit about everything because we've been working together for.
How much time do we have?
We have well, we can talk for hours. I know that, right?
If we're going to talk about everything, it may take a minute.
Yeah.
But I think what we'll do is we'll aim for like a 40-minute sweet spot of the actual presentation.
Perfect.
And since we've been working together on a couple of projects now in really surprising for me ways that I never anticipated would happen, I guess the first thing that I want to talk about before we get into that is Borderlands 3. Fantastic launch. The dust has settled. There is the game, like I've spent maybe 40 hours in it, which is very untypical for me. You know what's like when you work in video games, you don't play that many games. So the dust has settled. I really wonder what I'm pulling up the whole questions thing. How do you feel about these like really large AAA projects after essentially decades in the industry? And I'm much younger than you guys, so you have a lot more experience here.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, just putting it out there. I'm much younger than I look. No, but working with these like extremely large teams of hundreds of people with so many dependencies, with marketing plans behind it, with all the reveals. The one thing that I did know is that this time you did something different. You didn't go for a full-on E3 reveal like a typical AAA game. You did a PAX reveal and really want to talk more directly with consumers. So, how did that go for you guys? What did you guys learn? And would you do another AAA project at this point?
Yeah, I love AAA. I think that there's not many projects period in the world that can rationalize a budget and scale that we were able to with Borderlands, and it's inspiring. I mean, there's so many ways to win, and there's so many ways to create entertainment, and I don't want to suggest that. I mean, I love working on tiny stuff and indie stuff as much as I like the big stuff, but there's something unique about that, and it's extremely rare, and so I don't want to squander that ability to do that. I think that I remember a decade ago, or maybe it was 15 years ago now. It was probably 15 years ago. I did a talk somewhere, and I was asked about increasing budgets, and I said, I'm excited. I want to work on the first $100 million budget video game because, but I said I want to do that when it's a good decision. I don't want to just spend that money. I want to do it when that's a good decision, because we know that the audience is going to be there, and that the industry is large enough to support that kind of effort. And you pointed out that I'm older than you. I remember when we would
Sorry.
I remember a time when we would dance on the tables if our game sold 100,000 units. I remember it when the industry was that tight. None of us were in it because there was any money in it. We were in it just for the love of entertainment and the opportunity that this new medium we've created together, this digital interactive format brings. And we were all just figuring it out. And it was just a thrill to be on that vanguard. I still feel like we haven't figured it out. Like we still have so much work to do there. But to be able to come together and work on a scale that AAA, it's possible. Borderlands 3 was almost certainly one of the top 2 or 3 budgets of all the games launched in 2019. It might have been the most expensive game launched in 2019. I can't be sure because I don't know exactly what other folks are doing, but and it's a lot of pressure, and there's not a lot of groups on the planet that have demonstrated the ability to execute at that level. And I feel a crazy amount of good fortune to be able to sit in the seat that I do and be a part of this kind of thing. There are trade-offs with it, which are absolutely real. To rationalize that kind of investment, you have to believe that it's going to be worth it, which means you're probably doing something that is following something that's already been done before. You're probably working on a franchise that has been building, so you can trust that there's an audience there, and making that kind of investment can be made with some degree of confidence that you're not going to lose it. And once you're building on something, there's expectations, and expectation management is the most impossible thing in our business, right? Everyone has imagined, especially if you're talking about a sequel, everyone's imagined the game already in their mind, and if you don't do everything exactly the way they would have done it, there's going to be someone that feels disappointed about it. Meanwhile, there's just as many people that leave their minds free and cannot wait to just discover what we have chosen to do. And that's why we fight as artists. It's a thrill to take risks and to try things, and then to deliver it to an audience that's curious to consume whatever it was that we went after. And that's the dream relationship that an artist wants to have with the audience that ends up discovering their art. We tend to all sit on the spectrum with art between expression and commercialism. And I think Gearbox is a little on the expression side of center. We still like to be commercial. We don't want to go out of business. We don't want to make less than we spend. But we tend to, look, I remember when we first did Borderlands, and half the industry thought we were crazy and we were facing certain doom because of you can't mix peanut butter and chocolate. It's like, oh, well, no, it turns out it tastes pretty good.
Well, how do you balance that internally, right? The creative expression side and the commercial viability? Because, like when I think about the amount of people, it terrifies me, right? Like we work with much smaller teams, and in Eastern Europe where the burn rates are much lower. That kind of pressure, like you said, while also trying to do something new and exceed your fans' expectations, and you do have an established fan base. What's your advice on dealing with that, maybe for someone that's working on a sequel?
Yeah, I think it's all about prioritization and getting alignment on that prioritization, because one of the things that in order to do anything that has any value whatsoever, the people involved, all of the talent, from me all the way around the company, everyone has to care. And if you have people that are trying to make this stuff that don't care or aren't invested in what they're making, it's not going to be good. And when you play Borderlands, you can feel the touch of every developer. You can feel the heart of individuals. So you need to have a design that affords enough autonomy to allow individual expression and creativity to come through, and to allow that investment and that passion to come through. But at the same time, whenever you have people that care, invariably, and the more diverse you are, you're going to have disagreements about what way things should be, and we will kill ourselves as creators in a teamwork environment if we spend several weeks arguing about, for example, the color of one of the characters' eyes. And you kind of have to figure out at every point, at every turn, and at every scale, whether or not a decision is going to be meaningful to the result of the customer's experience and expectation. And if the result isn't going to change, like, yeah, we're going to have different opinions about whether the character had green eyes or blue eyes, but in the grand scheme of the whole product, how much does that opinion change whether the product's going to be successful or not? And every place you can find where it's really a judgment call, and you could win both ways, you could win with green eyes, you could win with blue eyes, you could win with black eyes, you have to let that fall into the hands of the people that are actually doing that work. Whoever's painting the eyes gets to decide. And if you can start with that default understanding of that's how we're going to work, a lot of it just naturally works. And then this other awesome thing happens where we might be in our own set of work. I'm focusing on the thing that I'm responsible for, that's my lane, if you will, and then somebody else is doing their lane, and something will happen, and I'll be like, holy crap, that's awesome. I didn't even expect that because the invention happened over there. Meanwhile, I'm doing the invention in my lane, and we're all throwing it in together, and it's all feeding on one another. It's the second when I start to tell you, the person who's painting the eyes, that I think you're going to doom us all if you make the eyes blue and not green because I think it should be green and you're painting it blue. Well, I'm either an asshole or I better be right that that's going to have a meaningful impact on the result of the product. And it can't just be a subjective thing. It has to be like, this is going to change how many people buy, like whether people buy the game or not. And that you've got to find a way to draw those lines and to figure out what matters, where the priority lies. The same thing is true on every project, whether you're talking about the very simplest and smallest project you ever worked on, Alex, with just a couple of people doing the best they can, to the largest project that I've ever worked on where you have literally hundreds and hundreds of people involved. The same exact problem exists, and the problem is there's not enough time or money or people or memory or CPU cycles. There's just not enough. And you can't get around that unless you prioritize, which means you don't do the things that don't matter. You don't take time on the things that don't matter. You don't spend resources and memory and people on the things that don't matter, and you spend your time on what does. And that's where you have to get alignment. What matters?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot to be said about hiring, right? Because what we've been doing in the past couple of years, we would come into a team, right, that we're publishing or that we have partnered up with or acquired, and they're like, they've been working with 4 or 5 people. So we just recently had an example where we had a team that used to work with 5 people, and now they're 27. Half a year later. So what you're saying really resonates here, and I guess if we can talk a little bit about like teams that scale, right? Because our viewers, many of them are in a situation where they got like a huge publishing deal or a funding round or something, and now they're like scaling into this like, okay, we're going to hire a lot of people, it's going to be awesome. I guess you guys went through that as well, probably during the Half-Life Opposing Force days where you had to scale up. And
we've been scaling ever since. We've had, I think our growth rate has been even throughout our entire existence. When I started Gearbox, there were 5 of us. Mm-hmm. And when we shipped Opposing Force, there were 12, I think.
So what's your advice on teams that need to scale rapidly because, they got funding or maybe their product has just taken off? What's your the top do's and don'ts by Randy Pitchford?
Well, I think it starts with the scaling can happen automatically if you start with the people that are scalable and that think in scalable ways. And it's about the balance between trust and decision-making, like hierarchical decision-making. You cannot move forward unless decisions can be made. So you have to have a method, you have to have a decision-making process and a method for handling decisions if they need to escalate. Right. So let's say you have a couple of people that they're kind of even where they're at, but they have differing opinions, and they've decided that the decision is meaningful, and it's not clear to them which way they should go. One's pulling in one direction, the other's pulling the other. it's going to be a meaningful decision, and whatever decisions is made. So you have to have a process for being able to escalate that decision and have a decision made. At the end of the day, the lack of decision making is what slows everything down. So the more decisive you can be in your decision making process, the better. But you also need to have people that are involved in every step of the way that can simultaneously be comfortable abdicating to the decision that gets made, whether they make it themselves or it's made at a level up, and abdicate to the decisions below. Meaning, I'm going to let things happen that I might not even know about, that this creative person below me is going to make decisions on, and I'm going to trust them to make those decisions, and whatever decisions they make, I'm living with. And that happens both below, and also I have something hard that I can't make the decision at my level. I've got to push it up one level, and let's let the decision be made there. If every person in the organization is capable of doing that, both up and down, then you can scale. If you have one person that can only be comfortable if at whatever it is that their focus is, the decision stops at them, then there's no ability to push things to the higher level scale, and they're gonna get stuck there. If they have no ability to let something happen that's in their lane that they weren't even aware of, they can't work with trust on higher level missions below them, then they won't be able to scale beneath them. And you can have individuals within your org that have limitations there, like that you can have a downward limitation or upward limitation as long as they're connected in a way where that's okay. Right? If I have somebody with a downward limitation where the most they're ever going to be able to do is such where they can have 3 people working for them, because that's the most that they can be completely authoritarian with, and those 3 people are drones. Well, as long as they're cool with the upside of that chain, and the company will never need more than that size, the below, then that'll live for a while. If at any point the company needs more than that, then it's going to have to find redundancy or an alternative, or that person's going to have to go away and someone's going to have to take their spot.
Yeah, I'd say actually that's the notion when I think about, as we've been building to scale, the friction point I've seen the most of, and I'll say the most people that I've either had to move out of position or move out of the company, is folks who could not relinquish control, who could not imagine letting someone else, letting someone else make a decision. And the hard part gets for a lot of people is like, man, I, as a more experienced manager, understand that decision actually does have some commercial implications, but weighing that against like, okay, but this person is passionate, and the amount of change to our results is so minimal that person's morale is worth more than the change to our result. And there's that balance that a manager also has to make when they're looking at a group of things, like understanding that morale of that person and the long term is actually more valuable than that eyes being blue versus green, because blue eyes actually sell 0.5% better in Italy, right? Like that kind of thing.
Is that true?
I don't know. Sounds like a thing I'd say to win an argument.
Yeah, look it up
when
in
I think
Italian.
about that, yeah, that's that level of trust for, because when you look at a person doing that, it's like, man, that scalability is like if they can trust and also live with the upward result of like, man, I need to trust that I, as a manager of these people, will be held to account for the decisions of that team under me. So that takes a lot of trust of the people that are working at one tier below you. To understand you're also accountable to things that you are not fully deciding to the tier above you. So yeah, that's trust of the people that work for you and trust of your manager of the tier above. So yeah, but usually it fails at the trust of the people who work for you is where I see the harder part is trusting decisions outside of your control instead of relinquishing control to a person who's a senior to you anyway.
Well, that's actually a really interesting topic to segue into a little bit, because you guys started out as a developer. We started out as developer, but just with one.
We're still developers, Alex.
Yeah.
We're still developers.
Okay, fine.
Right.
And technically,
you're ruining my segue here.
Technically, we're indies, but yes, we do other things besides develop. There's your segue.
You
two guys older than you.
Oh my god. Okay, publishing.
It's your fault, Alex. You asked us to do this.
It's totally my fault. This is on me.
You trusted us. This is what happens.
I trusted that this is going to be like a professional, on the point, like no mocking the young guy on the block.
We could switch to mocking the old guys. How's that? How's that COVID gonna work out for us old farts? Okay, boomer.
Oh wow, that's definitely getting cut out.
Yep.
Oh, so talking about like internal structure management, all of that makes a lot of sense, right? You need to empower the people to make decisions. You need to put the right people in the right spots in your organization. Uh, but what happens when it comes to working with third parties that you publish? When you have a business relationship, and then as a publisher, it is your responsibility to make the game sell and make it marketable and make like meet timelines, help the developer. How does that relationship change? Because we've had a lot of different experiences on the publishing front with this. I wonder if you guys can share some insights, or maybe we can brainstorm about this a little bit.
Ray, I think you should start with Guillaume.
I mean, I would handle it with, from a fundamental point of view. I think our publishing, Gearbox's publishing business is about supporting the creative. We want to be there to be. We're trying to be the publisher that we wished existed for us as we came up, because we are an independent developer, and we came literally from 5 people, and we just, maybe we just got lucky every single time in a row, but somehow we've become this thing that has all this capability and power and resources now. So we want to be the publisher that we always wished existed for us. And there's things that we never want to think about as a developer that we're grateful that publishers exist to think about. Like, in fact, I told Steve when he's like, when he wanted to do this, I'm like, listen, dude, I did not get in this business to worry about this kind of shit. And I know it's necessary, but the reason why we've always worked with publishers is because I don't want to ever once be pulled into a meeting where I have to worry about why a truck didn't get to a retailer full of boxes on the truck, right? So if you ever pull me into a meeting like that, I'm shutting the whole thing down and we're going to shoot it in the head. And but we have to recognize those things are necessary, that there are things that have to happen that connect the output of the creatives to the audience that's waiting to experience what the creatives have to do and have to make, and that's valuable, and we need that to exist, and it needs to exist in service of simultaneously the customer and the creator, and connecting the two together. And I think that where we've benefited is we don't need our development partners to be a creative outlet for us, because we do that when we want to make a game that we want to make, we make it. So the decision happens at the beginning of the process for publishing, where once the publisher is committed to the team and the vision, that's their game. Like, we're happy to provide services. We have like awesome user research, for example, and some developers find value in seeing what the output of user research is. I know we do when we do user research, and sometimes we make decisions about our games based on what we learn, but we're making those decisions as developers, and developers and creators need to make their own decisions about their art and need to be in control of their art, and Gearbox Publishing is all about that. And maybe because I did that, maybe Steve, you touch on compulsion, and Guillaume.
So with that in mind, and with that mantra that Randy set up from the start, is like, if we're going to be a publisher, this is going to be a pillar that we stand for, which is really making sure that we stand entirely out of the way of the developer. If we see their game and their pitch and we believe in it, we don't go trying to shape it into the thing that we want for our own creative outlet. We just let them run. We bet on them. That means we bet on them. And so that was a big part of when the very, biggest game at the time that we signed up for was We Happy Few with Compulsion Games. And the meeting first happened between Randy and the CEO of Compulsion Games, was Guillaume. And Guillaume really took to the notion of what Randy was talking about. The idea of like, wow, Compulsion was an indie studio of 15, 20 people, and they had this really great, interesting vision that was, for a lot of people, hard to ascertain the commercial viability of it. and they were thinking about if they're going to go with a publisher, who will, support them without really getting in the way of them trying to build what they want to build. And that was a fantastic process where Guillaume and I talk so regularly. He was very thorough with that process. We helped set them up, and also the business terms that we set up allowed for them to, in turn, be acquired by Microsoft Studios, right? And those guys have seen great success, and Gearbox was an accelerator for them to get to that moment, right?
So they did have a Kickstarter before you guys signed, right? How much did that help you guys verify the vision of it, of the game?
I mean,
for me, the Kickstarter had nothing to do with my interest in the title. In fact, I didn't even back the Kickstarter because I didn't notice it. I noticed the title because I knew Guillaume, and there's something clever there's something special about Guillaume, and there's something special about the team that he was able to build, and they had developed one of the first launch titles for the PlayStation with
2 or 3.
Contrast. It was I believe it was the Contrast on the PlayStation 3, and it was a really cool game, and my wife and I played it, and I thought it was wonderful. And I was aware of the game even before it launched. Guillaume had reached out to me looking for partners, and we weren't yet a publisher. And I'm like, man, I love this. You guys are doing great stuff. I would do you a disservice if I'd stepped in to try to help right now, because we're not sufficiently equipped to do it. And it was because of that game that I noticed, and I was sort of keeping an eye on Compulsion and what they were doing. And I missed the Kickstarter. I was busy or something, but I was watching them just directly and occasionally interacting with Guillaume. And there was something special about it, something interesting and different and worthwhile. And I remember thinking when I really dug into it, and I thought, I can imagine what they're going through right now. I know what it's like. I remember, I don't know how many times throughout my career, Alex, when we're starting out and I'm pitching publishers.
Yeah.
And every single time somebody has to fuck it up in the meeting, and it's like Randy, we love you, and we think there's some cool stuff in the today's version of that would be, Randy, we love you, there's some cool stuff in your concept, I wonder if you can add a battle royale mode. It'd be like something like, it's like, can we do something?
I did that before.
Can we do
PUBG
something?
Launched, but sure.
Can we do something with blockchain? And I'm like,
oh,
and I'm like, are you? I'm just face palming. Like, how do you guys even have the jobs you have? Like, what is? And so I can imagine like Guillaume looking for partners and just finding a way to get across the finish line. The guy's crafty and creative. He's working with, he's in Montreal, and there's an incredible infrastructure there with Canadian government, state and national, that he was able to kind of connect with and find avenues for investment just scrappily on his own. Resorted to having to do one of those first party deals where you commit your game to the platform and you're getting like a few $100,000, and it's like you just do what it takes. And I'm thinking, this is a person who's sticking to their vision and not wanting to compromise it in exchange for the big dollar commitments. And they found a way to finance their vision, but they're going to be suffering from that, because that alignment necessarily kept them from the kind of publisher that actually can deploy, that will create a marketing campaign and execute on it operationally and creatively, that will create a retail program and make sure that the product can be exposed to as many people as possible, and from sales to distribution to marketing, there's so many components of publishing that I personally am not interested in and I hate as a developer. I'm very glad that Steve finds that fun and to be a worthwhile enterprise and has built the Gearbox publishing business. But I know that we need that as developers. And I knew that since we had built those functions at Gearbox, that we might be the guys, because like you look around and everything's driven by suits, man. And they're not really in it for the same reasons that people like you and I are, Alex. Like,
yeah, at a large scale, there are a lot of non-gamers involved.
It's crazy. It's astonishing. Yeah. It's astonishing to me. Like, the whole industry could collapse tomorrow. I'm still doing it. I'm still playing video games every day, and I'm making. I don't care about, like, because this is literally the best medium. It's just the best medium. And we're just figuring it out. Holy crap, we have interactive for the first time in the history of our species. Our audiences can affect the experiences we're creating for them through interactive. It's a miracle that we get to be here in this time.
Well, I guess you touched upon a really interesting point here that I've personally noticed as well over the years, right? As long as you believe in the creative and then you understand each other, you can actually talk about the games that you love. You can reference a lot of the stuff. You can even jump into a game and then spend tens of hours over a weekend with your developer, right? I think those kind of relationships are just so important that without them, this becomes a suits industry, like you guys said. Well, actually, I do want to share how you and me, Randy, met, right? Okay. When I think it was at one of the conferences in Europe where you just we were just working on Hello Neighbor, and it had just taken off virally through the alphas. And you were like, "Oh, hey, we should print this on discs and publish it in retail." And I'm like, "Retail is dead. What are you talking about?" And I think it took a little bit of convincing, and then we started working with Steve. I hooked up Luke, my business partner, to figure that out. And holy crap, we're selling a lot over the past years.
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah, and to me, that was just astonishing to be able to do that. And I guess a question for you, Steve, would be, what do you think qualifies as a good retail title, assuming that, in a couple of months, we'll go back to the normal world? Yeah. Let's just ignore that part for now.
Hey, retail's still strong, actually.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We're like... there's a lot of things are actually spiking, like in some of the places like Target and Walmart. It's like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, you'd be surprised about there's a couple of particular stores that are maybe not selling anything at the moment, but that pickup has actually just your Targets, Walmarts, and all those other folks who are still around, because those are grocers and games stores. So those guys
anything that's
fine.
Essential. Yeah, the fundamental thing, Alex, and it turns out that if a person is in a place and they're there to buy things, that there's an opportunity to show them something that they weren't thinking about, but they might be willing to buy. So if I'm going to a grocery store to buy food and I'm like, you know what, after I'm done eating dinner, I might want to experience some entertainment. Let me go over to that section, and there's movies and video games there. There's an opportunity to reach that customer that we'll never have if we only talk to them through digital means. And that's where it works out. Sorry, Steve.
No, yeah. So let's think. It really is. So when you think about, yes, in the traditional world of, say, GameStop is actually still around, you do have what many refer to as core gamers showing out like, man, I'm going to a place to buy a game, right? And that is a different audience than the person who is at Walmart saying, I'm here to buy Tootsie Rolls, and then, I might want to buy a game. So it is a slightly different demo based on where you're at. But of course, the games that will sell the most places are ones that can be identified by a parent or a friend of like, oh yeah, I recognize that as a thing. Like, oh, this person, I know they love submarines. Subnautica, there's things there, so I'd pick that up. So it's the I guess the high concepts that anyone can understand traditionally do a little bit better at retail.
So family friendly is something that you would...
Traditionally, that's what you'll do stronger, but the mega hits, it doesn't matter, right? Like your Borderlands and your Call of Duties of the world, they're going to just keep on crushing because they're just prolific enough that it doesn't matter what the concept is, right? And then also marketing dollars can force awareness, right? So then that's the other thing that can be also done. And that's why you see basically everyone who launches games, they do retail and digital at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because your marketing dollars are going to be spent. It costs you the same amount of money to put a TV ad on. It's just up to you about how many places your game is available, right? So that's why if you're going to spend the marketing dollars to buy a Super Bowl ad, you would love your game to be on both retail and digital shelves. So
there's other interesting things that happen at retail too. There's a huge number of people in every part of the developed world, and even more so in the less developed, in emerging territories, that don't do transactions with credit cards. And they have cash and they want video games, but they're going to go to a place where they can do a cash transaction. There's also people that do have credit cards but don't really use them, or don't like to put that on the internet. They don't want to do an internet transaction. And there's a huge number of people that want access to the stuff, but their method of comfort is to physically go to a place, do a cash transaction, and then to walk away with a physical thing in their hands. And for new customers, it's actually, there's more people like that than digital. If you're buying Borderlands for the first time, you're 55% likely to buy it as a physical copy than a digital copy.
That's a really interesting insight. Do you think internet speeds in the emerging world have anything to do with retail as well?
The less friction we have on any approach, the more likely it's going to increase in adoption. But there's still something fundamental about the nature of the mind that would rather just do a person-to-person transaction. They'd rather go to a store, buy a thing in a place, and use cash to do it. And there's something about, even if they have the option, like these same people have phones that are really fast with 5G phones. These same people have internet connections at home that are really fast, but that's the way they want to do business.
Yeah, and that's also true for especially the gifting world, right? You want to hand a person a thing. So that's a huge factor. But yeah, and then you also imagine, like, not only are adults, but also guess what? Everyone who's under 17, chances are they don't even have the possible credit card yet, right? So that is all your T-rated games and your E10 games. The folks who want that, a lot of time, that's their only path is cash, right? Because they mowed lawns and they want to go buy a game, right?
Also remembering, like, I've lived in Amsterdam for 10 years before I moved to the US. Finally got my green card. Woo!
Congratulations.
Thank you. Americanizing, working on my accent, still terrible. But what fascinated me, I moved to the Netherlands in 2010, and by that time I was from Eastern Europe, from Latvia. We had credit cards in Latvia like crazy. You could do anything you want, online, offline, whatever. But then you move to Western Europe, credit card? Oh no, you need like 2 years of history in your bank, and then maybe we'll consider it. And then online was still underdeveloped, and they're catching up now. But it seems like the Western European world, which is very wealthy in terms of economy, had a lot of issues with getting digital economies rolling up. Do you guys see that in your sales, that Western European countries are actually going up in terms of retail, or is that a comment that we should just cut out from this recording?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't want to give any really indications on that. Okay. Yeah, as far as on the Borderlands side,
we'll cut that out.
Yeah.
Can we actually talk about how many copies Hello Neighbor has sold in retail?
I mean, that's your decision, man.
Yeah, we can.
We're private.
I don't know. I don't know the number. Can you tell me?
You don't know the number.
Like. Oh, you're actually going to look it up? Okay, fine.
I'm going to look it up. We send you sales reports every week, man.
I know. I have how many unread emails do I have? 50,812.
Unreads? Oh, you must have a different inbox than mine. I'm currently at 1,685 unreads in my
amateur.
Yeah.
Let's see. You're just shy of 2 million units of Hello Neighbor sold through at retail.
Oh, okay. Yeah, retail is definitely that.
Yeah, and consider like indie title. Like I remember one of my favorite games a few years ago was Firewatch.
Oh yeah.
And a couple of years after they launched, they were screaming from the highest mountain, "We reached we sold 1 million units, you guys!"
Uh-huh.
And you know, your Hello Neighbor game's done 2 million in retail alone. I don't think there was any retail treatment for Firewatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Firewatch is also one of those examples. Like, you know, that game is just so beautiful. That
Great.
You know, you look at the art, you have probably seen it. You know, it was featured all over E3 and all of that. So yeah, I mean, retail. I guess to summarize is, you know, if you have
still a thing,
still a thing,
still a thing. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think what I think is people get confused when they see these publishers talk about revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is what you can, as a person who publishes games or, you know, makes games, understand that, as Randy was saying, it's that first time customer introduction. You can think of retail as a customer acquisition channel, except they pay you even for that acquisition if you're coming from mobile world, right? And then, of course, people buy DLC and all those other things after the fact. So when you see those giant reports from EA, they're like, oh my gosh, FIFA made all this money. All those folks buying all those additional FIFA points, a lot of them started at retail. And so that's the point, is like, yes, there's tons of digital, and digital is the majority of actual revenue, but the starting point of where customers first come into your game, that is also very, very proportional to retail. Like, that's a big piece as well, to get people introduced to your game.
One thing you mentioned, Steve, was you know, where you put your marketing dollars. Is there any kind of story you could share on, like, where you were surprised that something worked in your publishing, or when you guys were working with launching Borderlands, one of the Borderlands says?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, to be clear, like 2K does the operational marketing. We'll do a bunch of the creative side, but certainly we poured a lot of money into marketing ourselves. I think the first thing is that it's, I am weirded out by how specific the targeting can get, right? Like, yeah.
Give me everyone who has interacted with this keyword and has said this thing on a Facebook call in the last 2 weeks. That's not how it actually works, but on the back end it does.
Yeah, it's definitely, it weirds me out to that degree. It's like, yeah, that part's craziness. So yeah, you can find out based on like, hey, give me this age range, this city, all these things. You can do all that stuff, and like that's also even on the basic level. Random people can just show up and sign up for a Google AdSense account, and they can get that level of demographic targeting. But it gets even crazier. That's really surprising. Just how crazy it can get. But I think the other thing is that it's almost always the I guess the wild shots, the ones where you stay the hell out of the way of the creatives way, is one the people react best to the ads. That's really, it's very similar to making games, is also making the advertisement. It's like, it's gonna be an artist with a creative vision. You should stay the hell away their place as well. Has honestly been my lesson, is like, man, it's true for trailers, it's true for games. It's just let the passion happen, and just buy in at the surface level, and make sure that you have a person, you know, they have the talent, or a team. That has been an experience where, like, every time we've tried to micro a trailer or a commercial, almost always you'll get like, all right, it was okay.
Yeah,
every time
it
you stay out of the
anything
way,
special,
right? Like, okay, it served its purpose. But when you stay out of the creative's way, almost always better.
Yeah, all of our award-winning trailers and marketing efforts have all come from creative-driven and talent-driven, and get the suits out of there.
Yeah, that's true for the Borderlands 3 stuff as well. Yeah, the stuff that won the awards was, Mike Roth did this thing where he said, "Hey, Randy, here's 3 visions." I'm sure you remember that meeting, Randy. Randy's like, "That one," and then go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most crazy thing we've done with you guys was when, I think it was GameStop that contacted us, like, hey, do you want to sponsor a NASCAR car?
Oh, the NASCAR. That was so great.
It was literally a NASCAR car
Hello Neighbor
branded
NASCAR.
with Gearbox, tinyBuild, and Hello Neighbor. And we have the hood back in our office.
That's I'm so glad you got the hood. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, it's sitting in our meeting room, so whenever, you know, like, folks next door come in, they go like, what the hell? Why is there a NASCAR?
That's so great. I love
Yeah. That showed up at our office first, and Eric really wanted to keep it. I was like,
that stuff's always got to end up with the talent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I've argued that my entire career for our stuff with our games, with the publishers, and now that we're in the publisher seat, we got to find a way to make sure it ends up with you guys.
Yeah, you learn that that's so much more valuable than a hood in our office. It's more valuable. It's in your office, and you're excited that we made that happen. You know?
Yeah, and it becomes a talking point, right? That's probably going to live on that wall for whatever time we spend in that place. Yeah. So. Guys, this is really interesting. The other subject that I want to segue into is, this is one of those years, the next gen year, right? And it's been a really bizarre year for next gen. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm excited though. Oh my God, I'm excited.
Yes.
IO is changing everything. I'm so pumped.
So the super fast SSDs, we've seen the demos. We've got an idea of what to expect. What are you guys excited about with this new tech?
Godfall? No, I mean, what? Who said that? I'm excited about IO, man. This is a game changer. And what's funny is I think customers aren't used to thinking about technology the same way that creators are. So whatever it is that was the step, that's what marketing people tend to push out, like, how many teraflops is processing, and no, marketing has never to the customer level, the consumer level, pushed the importance of IO, because we've kind of been stuck in the same paradigms for so long. This is the game changer. We are going to be able to move so much fucking data from storage to memory to let the processor use it than we've ever, it's obscene, the jump. You can't even, it's like orders of magnitude of capability that suddenly unlocked, that we're all racing at using to the best of our ability, and it's so freaking awesome. I love it. So it's like so many things that have always been a struggle as a customer, as a gamer, that I know why the problem's there, and that it's like we now have the tools and the hardware to get around this stuff. And it's my God,
there are so many things that I think gamers accept as, well, this is how games are. For example, like how many elevators and doorways are in games, right? Like that's just developers hiding load times, right? Like that's not actually because developers think it makes it more fun.
We got to cash shit in and out with these slow ass
right? Right. Why is this intro video so long? It's because we're loading crap in the background, right?
Why is it non-skippable?
Yeah.
Why is this company logo 4 minutes long?
Right. So I'm excited to see what happens, and I think it's going to break some of the expectations of gamers, not even realizing the things that they accepted as gamisms are going to suddenly not be there anymore. Like that's, it's going to be fun, man.
And what's funny about it too is we're so used to touting other metrics and maybe some graphical features that we can't help ourselves. Like some folks are thinking it's going to be about ray tracing. It's not going to be about ray tracing. We're barely going to notice that, frankly. But we're going to notice the fact that these worlds can be seamless and huge, and everything, the friction on the experience is just going to go down tremendously. And we're all going to feel it, and we're not even going to wonder how we ever lived in this world. It's kind of like, I remember back when I played the Bard's Tale on my Commodore 64, and after every fight you'd wait 30 seconds for the little graphic to load that showed the treasure. There was like gold, and like it took 30 seconds just to load the treasure art so that we could see the results of the combat we just went in and get our loot. And that, like, the equivalent of that today, like it's just a whole new step. I'm so pumped for it.
Oh yeah. I mean, Alex, did you see the Xbox first gameplay reveal today?
No, I missed that. I really should have seen that. I was preparing for the call with you guys, combing my hair and making jokes about young people.
Working on
you gotta write. Somebody's got to write that material.
It's definitely not spontaneous, and this definitely were.
If you look at the comments that gamers are making right now, they're saying it looks a little bit better, but they're also they're realizing right now, and you look at the comments now, like the graphics is not going to be the thing they're going to notice. It's going to be about the IO. It's going to be all about these other things that they're really going to just have to experience to get the full feel for what that is. Because yeah, guess what? Like a lot of people can't even tell the difference between 4K and 1080p, right?
Yeah. I play at 1440p. Like I don't care.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm also half blind. But
and what, the other thing too is, as the generation goes on, we're going to feel it more and more. And the difference, there's going to be some cool things with some of the launch games. I have visibility on at least one launch game. But I also know what's coming and what we're planning for. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of this. So it's just I'm so pumped. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the biggest challenge, because I'm primarily a marketing guy, right? Like I used to be a developer. I sucked at it. I really should not be a developer at all. But you're right that the visuals, it's the first generation transition when the visuals are not what's going to try and sell it. And it's all about the look and feel of the game. So whenever you see some of these presentations and some people try to explain like how it's going to feel and talking about the sound and the loading times, we understand it, right? And I hope the developers at DevGAMM listening to us right now also understand it. What are kind of like maybe the advice you can give for people, for developers considering next gen? On what kind of stuff should they be excited about in practical terms, right? We mentioned elevators, we mentioned like larger worlds. Is there anything else that we should be looking out for as game developers for next gen? I can briefly name an example, right? Like, for example, the large survival games that are out there on Steam right now. I play all of them a lot. And if you guys try to run them off a hard drive, that's a bad time. That's a bad experience, like 17-minute loading times. And then you put it on SSD and it's like a few minutes. So what kind
and even SSD, think about the unless you built a computer within the last 6 months, and when you built that computer, you bought the highest end motherboard and put the most expensive like M.2 SSD drive in there, you don't know yet how fast that is. And as a developer, we know that, like, the effect on build. Like we just build our game with old IO, and it could take forever. And just that simple change, and it seems simple, but like we're talking about years of engineering and design and all of the technology advancing to the point that can support this, so that it can all converge for us. But the bus change there, efforts that used to take 10 minutes now take 10 seconds. And it's like a whole, it's going to take us a while to figure out all the places that manifests. But something as simple as Borderlands, if you want to talk tangibly, in Borderlands 3 we have to make trade-offs all the time based on what can actually live in memory and what we can get access to quickly, and what how much latency there is between, if data exists in storage, how long it takes us to get it into memory and get it to something the CPU can deliver to the eyes on the screen. And with the procedural weapon system in Borderlands 3, there are billions of possible combinations. We have to have all of that stuff ready to go at any time, so that if we generate a weapon, it can play in real time. There's reasons why other loot games will give you some loot when you're in the round, but then you get out of the round and go to some other screen where you actually ingest that loot and now can equip it and use it and then take it to the next. Like, Borderlands is unique in that way, where if you find a gun, you can immediately pick it up and put it into service. To do that, we have to have all that content available in memory, ready to go. And it is expensive, and it creates massive trade-offs with other aspects of the game. Nobody's gonna have to make that trade-off anymore. Like that, you can have 10 times as much data as is in Borderlands 3 just for guns alone, and it could live on the drive, and you can just get it just like that and have that be running and visual to the audience, which means that we don't need to anticipate what the player's going to have or not.
You can
the simulation can be so much more dynamic, and we're making tons of trade-offs all the time. Like when we're talking about one of the big hurdles, like we're in Borderlands 3, where every game wants to push the limits, and it makes trade-offs, and there's things you can do, and every game that rides the limit, you can find combinations the developers didn't anticipate, where performance can be affected, and you can actually visibly see it. So there's places in Borderlands 3 where if you get the right gun and get the right gear and you do the right build and you're with the right number of enemies on screen, it's like in your, say on a stock Xbox Durango, stock Xbox One, not an Xbox One X or anything, it's like, oh man, we dipped down to 20 frames per second here. And it doesn't feel great. Now, you know, the conditions have to be right to create that. A lot of that is because of those trade-offs. So now we want to do a thing like, hey, we want to make the level cap increase, and we want to get to the point where people can actually have 2 capstones of their skill trees. Well, some of those capstones have a performance implication, and when we know you can have one but not the other, we know what the maximum amount of performance implication is. The worst case scenario, we know what that is. Well, now if you can have both running at the same time, that's going to create more performance hit, more effects flying off, more. So we have to like do all this work to earn a huge amount of. We have to optimize a bunch of other stuff and make other trade-offs, and then we can get to the point through a huge amount of work where we can let that go up. At the same time, we're trying, like, it's a big mess, and it kind of reminds me when memory started exploding. Like back in the day, and this is before your time, young man. Back in the day, getting your program to run with all of the operating system stuff within 640K of memory.
Oh my.
That was the deal.
Oh yeah, there were special apps to help you optimize it, man.
Yeah, and like whether our games would eat shit based on what order operating system functions were loaded. If you load your the thing that let your keyboard and mouse talk to the PC before you loaded your sound drivers, it would take up a couple more bytes than if you did it the other way, and those bytes were the difference between whether your freaking game would crash or not. Like, we're talking about bytes, and then like memory changed, and suddenly memory got cheap and ubiquitous, and we had all this memory, and we're allowed to just be abusive and just go nuts, and all this great stuff emerges. Yes, some sloppiness emerges, but all this great stuff emerges. There's still crazy guys in the demo scene, right? I don't know if you ever messed around in the demo, like, where, holy crap, this looks like better than Quake, and it's 4K. I just downloaded a 4K file, and when it unpacks, I'm getting a graphics engine that's better than Quake. Like, it's like optimization is real, but that's just very, like, you have to decide where your energy. You only have so many people and so much time that you're going to spend developing a game. Where are you going to spend it? And when we don't have to worry about, like, we got to a point where we didn't have to worry about memory in the same way. We still worry about it, but not in the same way as we did back then, where like a huge amount of our effort was spent just dealing with that problem. We worry about it not as much now. We're now going to enter that world with IO, and it's going to be a whole new world.
I love it. Right, guys, how are we on time? Do we have time for one more question, or shall I wrap it up?
I'm game if you're game. I think my next
meeting
is actually,
Randy.
Yeah, my next meeting's actually with Steve at 2:30.
Well, we can run that meeting. I can moderate.
Sure.
No, so the last part I want to talk to you guys is the changing business model landscape of today, right? We've seen a platform war on PC start last year, and both Gearbox and tinyBuild have shipped titles on the Epic Games Store, and there's also a war for subscriptions that is now brewing. There's Xbox Game Pass, they also have PC Game Pass, there's Apple Arcade, and a lot of other like Humble Monthly popping up. So it seems like there are now a lot of opportunities for game developers to get some funding. And at the same time, you also have shifting business models. So, like, for example, we launched a game called Total Reliable Delivery Service on the Epic Games Store on April 1st, and we actually launched it for free for a week so that we could get a huge install base, and we got, I think, over 5 million installs. And we would monetize those users with ongoing DLC. So that's a business model that we would have probably never considered. So how about Gearbox? Are you guys looking at these different business models? What do you think?
Yeah, that's what's exciting, is we can innovate in creativity we can also innovate in business. And at the end of the day, there has to be a positive relationship with the customer. I think what drives Gearbox from this point of view is one fundamental idea, which is, look, we have to accept that entertainment is a commodity and there's a transaction. And in order for people to dedicate their lives to creating entertainment, they have to be able to make a living, and there has to be some money changing hands here. That's a fundamental. Let's just accept that. If that's the world, then the way we want to approach it is such that we want all of the customers that experience a Gearbox video game to feel like they got the better side of the bargain, that whatever value they got out of the experience far exceeds whatever money they put into it. And that's why, like, you know, with Borderlands 3, we have people that have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the Borderlands already. With Borderlands 2, it's been out for 7 years. Some of the extreme ends of that, like, people have played that game for 3,000, 4,000 hours, which is almost a full-time job for years. Is what that nets out as. It's just, and that's a huge amount of value, considering that, yeah, it's AAA, but at the end of the day, $60 if you bought it when it came out. It's a bargain by that.
Or
like,
a deep discount.
There's no other medium on earth that gives you that return on value. And I love that we can do that because of the scale that games can reach and our ability to make a thing and reach as many people as are interested in it. So I love that. And I love innovation in business model. I think as long as that fundamental principle, the principles need to be sound, which is the customer's getting the better end of the deal, but the business can sustain. And we can be, we want to put more and more into the content we're creating. We want to put more. Our mission is to entertain. That's what drives us. And this isn't, and you know, some creators are better here than others. Most of us that are actually doing the development and doing the creativity, we just want to make the coolest thing possible for our user. And we will put everything we can into that. And I like the exploration of business models. I know that some people will take a loss in order to try to capture and compete. Right? Like, let's think about a different industry for a minute, like ride sharing. A lot of those guys, Lyft or Uber, they raised a lot of capital with VC, and they're actually spending more than they're making. They're choosing to lose business or lose money in order to try to capture, and that's what you've done with your decision to give away. You spent a huge amount of money making delivery service, and you gave it away. And you're hoping that once you've engaged some customers, that some of them you'll be able to monetize, and that you can monetize it to a degree where you make your money back and make a profit. And you're being intrepid. You are innovating, and you're taking a risk. You don't actually know certainly how it's going to work out. You have trust and you have hope, and you're willing to take the risk, and you've probably done it in a way where if it all crashes and burns, you're not dead. You've probably taken a risk you can tolerate. But what you're hoping is that it works out, that you're rewarded for your risk, and that it ends up being a better business model for you, so that you can then have more resources to invest more into the next project and try things. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes when big players make big tectonic moves, it can have radical effects on everyone else in the industry, right? So when you talk about things like subscriptions, I'm both enthusiastic and nervous. I think the value proposition with Game Pass is pretty nice. As a customer, I like that I can pay $10 a month or whatever it is and have a lot of optionality.
And try a lot of new games you won't have otherwise tried.
Yes, and I think that's true.
Myself.
That said, there's a couple things I noticed. Now, I invest a lot in video games. I play a lot, and I do have a little bit more disposable incomes than most. But if I bought Game Pass for $10 a month, and my maximum budget for a year for video games is $120, then that's the only choice I can make, which means that I'm necessarily limiting my freedom, and I'm only now going to be exposed to those things that are being curated by that platform, which means I might not do that. And we know where that goes eventually. We can see it like on there's some people that end up subscribing to Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and HBO, and you can keep going down the list. And in order to have access to all the content, I'm spending $200 a month. I don't, when I probably spend more than $200 a month on video games today, but when I was in college, I was not spending $200 a month on video games. I couldn't afford it. And not many people can, which means now we're having to pick which things we want to curate. Now, if in the course of this too, here's the second thing I noticed. Before Game Pass existed, I would have bought Gears of War, and I would have bought it for $60.
Yep, same here.
I would have bought the Outer Worlds, and I would have paid $60. And I can stop there, because those two games add up to the yearly subscription. I did not buy them.
Yeah.
Guess what? I ended up playing more than Gears and more than Outer Worlds on Game Pass, which means that, and some of those other things that I played, I would have bought too, which means that money was sucked out of the economy, which means that Game Pass is probably a loss leader decision. This is probably, which is not bad for the customer in the short term, but bad overall for both the customer and the business in the long term, because the engine of creativity needs to have fuel in it. And I would have otherwise been absolutely comfortable and willing to spend more than $120 on the content I've already consumed, which means that money was now deleted from the game industry, which means that investment will not go in to make more games and empower more creativity, which means as a customer, I will have less optionality down the road. I don't like that idea from either a customer point of view or from an industry point of view. And I know why Microsoft's doing it, because they're competing and they're trying to capture users. They crossed a milestone where they got 12 million people now for Game Pass. Yeah.
10, I think 10 is the number I saw, but it might be 12.
Sorry, 10. Was it 10? I don't remember. It might have been 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the point where critical mass hits, right? Typically 10 mil is when... What
is critical mass? I remember fondly when we crossed that line for our Shift online service. We have way more than that now. It depends on what you do with them. No one's ever spent $1. No one spent a penny because they were part of Shift. We don't monetize that at all. It's a service for online, to support the online infrastructure. And they're necessary services, but there's a lot of ways to cut that. I think that it's really interesting that now that we have all these folks trying to create platforms and capture customers, that they are creating a different economy. They are trying to buy. They're trying to buy the content that they know will drive people to their platforms, and so they're, in some cases, even they're underselling to the customer and then overpaying to some developers and publishers in order to capture content. There's going to be a change, and guess what? It's going to be one of two things, and probably a little bit of both. Less money in the economic engine of the industry, which means future development later, and more pressure on raising the price to the customer. So what will happen is all these guys will capture as many customers as they can, and then they'll inch that price up, or they'll find other ways to monetize them. And it'll end up costing us more than the $10 a month we thought it was. But that's human nature. Everyone's exploiting it as best as they can. I this, Alex, I'm a magician.
Yeah.
And
I've noticed.
And magicians have learned that there are vulnerabilities in human reasoning and human perception, and that we can exploit those vulnerabilities. And a magician exploits vulnerabilities in human reasoning and human perception in order to try to create a sense of wonder and create entertainment and a sense of joy and happiness in their audience. That's why a magician's a magician and not a charlatan. A charlatan will exploit those same vulnerabilities, but for the explicit disadvantage of their target, and to enrich themselves. And everyone's trying to game human nature here, but the folks that we should reward, I think, are those folks that are trying to legitimately do what we should be here to do, which is to entertain people, to try, like this medium is about the creation of joy and happiness. And the artists of our world are people that have something to say, or the folks that are highly empathetic, that can only be happy when they're creating joy for others. And those are the ones we should try to identify and get behind the most. And we should be very careful about those that want to just suck things out of the economy so that they can meet where video games is a means to an end, we should be wary of. Anyone where video games, the medium itself is the end, those are the people we should celebrate. And we can feel it in the content. We can feel it in your content. I think that's why you guys are winning so much. You're doing things that have the heart behind it is for the purpose of what this medium's for. And you can see that all over tinyBuild's games. And I think you could see it in Gearbox games too, because that's what drives us. And we don't always, we might endeavor to try to entertain people every time. And there will be people, like, I'll have the same game that someone loves, someone else hates. That's the nature of all subjective experience. My favorite musicians in the world can make the best song that my favorite song in the world. You might hate that song. I might love the song. The same band can create a different song that I think is garbage, right? It's the B track of a different album, and that's okay. But we need to celebrate those artists and those creators, and we need to empower them. I went all over the place there.
Yeah, I did want to actually throw in another thing that's worth. I guess when Randy talked about his excitement and also his wariness, I'm certainly on the same page with him with a lot of those notions. I think it's also worth considering when I think about, say, I'm a developer and I agree to do a deal with one of these guys making a subscription service. Say, you know what, I'll give it to you for $500,000, right? And what I'm wary of is the developer not knowing, because they don't have the resources, how valuable the thing is they have in their hands. And the person who's buying it probably has a better idea. And I worry about when that transaction happens, what is the upside that is available to that creator now, right? Say 2 people subscribe because of that game is now on the subscription service, or 2 million people subscribed. What is that creator now getting that is now no longer sales versus what is the person who runs the subscription service getting, right? Like, imagine what would have happened with many of those little indie games that we've all worked on together that have sold hundreds of thousands and millions of units. What would have happened if we had chosen one of those games and put it just into one of these subscription services instead? Who would have seen the success? Would have been the creator, or would have just been a new subscriber count? And what are the economics of that transaction, and how transparent is the subscriber system holder to the creator? And that's another very, very important piece when I think about, yes, I agree there's money being sucked out of the economy of video games from folks who would have bought more that don't have to now, but I also worry about money being sucked out of the pockets of creators. That's another sense of wariness I have. Now,
and we're helping it, and we're helping it, enabling it. The reason why the Epic Game Store exists is mostly because Epic noticed that we all helped Steam build a user base, and we, in exchange for us giving Steam so many users, we let them take 30% of our upside. And Epic's like
even more with refunds and chargebacks.
And Epic's like that. The economics of that aren't fair. I can actually build a business that's disrupts all of that, and I'm still winning. So Epic's going to lose money with their 18%. And if you're already at licensing on Unreal, I guess it's the equivalent. You're already paying.
No, they're 12. They're 12%.
But they're not going to lose money, which tells us, wow, this is completely inequitable. And guess what? We're helping them build an audience now. And those people will shop, and there'll be a time when someone else shows up and they're going to do the same thing that Epic did. and then all the Epic people are going to be like, screw you, I don't want to have another library, all my games are on the Epic store. And it's like, well, here we go again. It's so funny, but
yeah,
I remember when
Steam
first appeared and everyone wanted to destroy it for the same reasons. It's like,
yeah,
so great.
But do you guys remember when Valve announced that their royalty tiers were changing?
Mm-hmm.
It was in November of about 2 years ago.
Yep.
And they said, hey, no longer 30%. If you're big enough, 25%, and then maybe even 20%.
Per tile.
And then
I think that's under
and then,
NDA, not sure.
yeah, but then do you also remember about a week later, the Epic Game Store was announced with their 12% rate? Do you wonder if maybe sensing competition in the marketplace compelled them to do that?
Of course. Of course.
I like competition in the marketplace.
I think it's chemtrails, Steve. It's 5G and chemtrails and Bill
It might be that too. Yeah.
Gates.
So like, I'm excited for a competition in the marketplace because that's what happens is that, what happens is, guess what? The guys running the store marketplaces are giving more to the creators now. And that competition is what has enabled that. That's great.
Yeah, and that'll just lead to more games.
Yep.
Better games and more options and better options is what we want as players.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's leave it at that. All we want is more games, better games, right? And we have talked about a lot of stuff here. I hope that the DevGAMM audience found it really insightful. Thanks a lot, guys.
We didn't touch on whether the price of AAA is going to change. That's a whole other topic. No, let's open a whole new can. No, I'm kidding.
A new can of worms. All right. Well, that's going to be for the next one.
Let your people talk amongst themselves about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can do that in the August DevGAMM, the one that was supposed to be in Kiev. That's also going to be online, probably. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, man.
I hope the DevGAMM folks get some value out of the conversation.
Yeah.
Cheers.